Billionaire son sees Waitress feed his disabled father. How she becomes the recipient of a life-altering act of kindness. The restaurant buzzed with the low hum of conversation, the clinking of silverware against porcelain, and the occasional burst of laughter from a table in the back. Amelia moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays with practiced ease, her face illuminated by a smile that never seemed to waver. It was just another night at the elegant bistro, a place where the wealthy dined, oblivious to the struggles of those who serve them. But Amelia wasn't one to complain. She had learned long ago that kindness cost nothing, and so she offered it freely, even when the world gave her little in return. At a quiet table near the window sat an elderly man, his hands trembling as he tried to lift a spoon. His suit, though worn, had once been expensive. His eyes, a shade of faded blue, held a distant sorrow. He struggled with each bite, his frail fingers unable to maintain their grip. A few patrons glanced his way, their expressions flickering between pity and discomfort before looking away. Amelia noticed immediately. She approached without hesitation, kneeling beside him as she gently placed her hands over his. "Let me help you," she said softly, her voice warm and genuine. Without waiting for a response, she cut his food into smaller pieces, then carefully lifted a spoonful to his lips. The old man hesitated, his eyes glistening with something unspoken before he finally accepted the gesture. No one had done this for him in years. Across the restaurant, at a table cloaked in shadows, a young man watched. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his wrist adorned with a timepiece worth more than most made in a year. His face was sharp, handsome in an almost effortless way, but his expression was unreadable. Lucas Sinclair had grown up with everything, a last name that commanded respect, wealth that shielded him from the struggles of ordinary people, and a life devoid of hardship. He had never waited for anything. Everything he wanted was his with a snap of his fingers. But as he watched Amelia carefully wipe the corner of his father's mouth, offering him a small smile that made the old man's eyes brighten, something in him shifted. His father, a man he had not seen in years. A man who, until this moment, he had believed was living comfortably somewhere far away, enjoying the remnants of his fortune. Yet here he was, frail, struggling, and ignored by the very world that once worshipped him. Lucas's grip tightened around his glass. How had this happened? How had his father, the once mighty Charles Sinclair, fallen so far? The memory was still raw. His father's mistakes had cost them dearly, scandals, lawsuits, and a swift downfall from grace. Lucas had left, distancing himself from the wreckage, forging his own empire with a ruthlessness that ensured he would never share the same fate. But now, seeing him like this, something inside Lucas wavered. Amelia had no idea who Charles Sinclair was. To her, he was just a man in need. She continued feeding him with the patience of someone who understood suffering, who had perhaps known it herself. Lucas watched as his father finally found his voice. "You're too kind, dear. People don't do this, not anymore." Amelia chuckled. "Well, I'm not most people." Lucas had heard enough. He stood abruptly, tossing a few crisp bills onto the table before striding toward the door. His chest felt tight. He needed air. He shouldn't have come here. But as he stepped outside into the cool night, he couldn't shake the image of his father's frail hands and the way Amelia had held them so gently, so effortlessly. For the first time in years, Lucas Sinclair felt something dangerously close to guilt. The next day, Amelia arrived at work as usual, tying her apron as she prepared for another long shift. She barely noticed the sleek black car parked across the street, nor the man watching her from inside it. Lucas had returned. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was curiosity. Or maybe it was something deeper, something he wasn't ready to name. Inside, Amelia found Charles Sinclair seated at the same table waiting. She smiled. "Back so soon?" The old man nodded. "I wanted to see you again." Amelia laughed. "Well, I'm here all night, and I'll make sure you eat properly again." Lucas exhaled, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. He needed to know more about this woman. He needed to understand why someone like her, someone with nothing, could give so freely when he, with everything, had never once looked back. And so, he made a decision. A life-altering decision. Amelia had no idea that her kindness had just set something unstoppable in motion. Lucas had never been one for sentimentality. He had built walls around himself, fortified them with wealth and power, and made sure no one could breach them. But as he sat in his car, watching Amelia through the restaurant's window, he realized those walls were beginning to crack. He didn't understand why, but something about her, her effortless kindness, the way she had treated his father with a compassion he had long forgotten, made him question everything he had believed. People weren't supposed to be this selfless. Not in his world. Everyone had an agenda. Everyone wanted something. But Amelia? She had no idea who his father was. No idea that the frail old man she was helping had once been one of the wealthiest and most powerful figures in the country. And yet, she had treated him with a tenderness Lucas had never even seen in his own home growing up. Lucas leaned back in his seat, running a hand through his dark hair. He could walk away now, pretend he had never seen any of this, push it out of his mind the way he had pushed away everything else that threatened his carefully constructed life. But something inside him wouldn't let him. He needed to understand. He needed to know more about this woman who had unknowingly disrupted his world. The next evening, he returned to the restaurant. This time, he didn't stay in his car. He walked inside, his presence commanding attention as he entered. The maitre d' recognized him instantly, his face flushing with nervous energy. Lucas Sinclair wasn't just another wealthy customer. He was a name that carried weight, a name that could make or break a place like this with a single review. But Lucas wasn't here for business. He wasn't here to be catered to. He was here for answers. Amelia was busy serving another table when she felt a shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't uncommon for wealthy patrons to dine here, but something about the air felt heavier. She glanced up and saw him. Tall, impeccably dressed, eyes sharp as if they missed nothing. He wasn't looking at the menu. He was looking at her. She approached cautiously, forcing a polite smile. "Good evening. Can I get you something to drink?" Lucas studied her, searching for any sign of recognition. There was none. She had no idea who he was. That intrigued him even more. "I'll take whatever you recommend," he said, his voice smooth but unreadable. Amelia nodded, noting how his gaze never wavered from her. She had dealt with difficult customers before, men who thought money gave them power over people like her. But there was something different in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps? Or something deeper? She wasn't sure. As the night went on, Lucas observed her carefully. She moved with an ease that suggested she had been doing this for years. But there was no bitterness in her steps, no exhaustion in her smile. She treated every customer with the same warmth, never once letting the stress of the job dim her kindness. When Charles arrived, his frail form moving slowly as he entered, Amelia immediately went to help him to his usual table. She didn't hesitate, didn't make a show of it. To her, this was just another part of her day, helping someone who needed it. Lucas watched as she sat with his father for a moment, making sure he was comfortable before she took his order. She spoke to him as if he mattered, as if he wasn't just another forgotten man in a world that had long moved on from him. Lucas clenched his jaw. He had spent years resenting his father, blaming him for everything that had gone wrong. But had he ever once considered what had happened to him after the fall? Had he ever bothered to check? No. He had assumed Charles would survive on his own, that he would find a way to crawl out of the ruins of his mistakes. But here he was, struggling to even lift a spoon, relying on the kindness of a waitress who had no reason to care. Lucas didn't stay long that night. He left a generous tip, but it wasn't about the money. He needed to think. He needed to figure out what it was about Amelia that had unsettled him so much. The following night, he returned again. This time he spoke to her. "You treat him well," Lucas said as she refilled his water. Amelia looked at him, slightly surprised that he was engaging in conversation. "He's a good man," she said simply. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You don't know him." She smiled. "I don't need to. I just know he's alone. And no one deserves that." Lucas studied her, trying to understand. "Why?" Amelia hesitated, as if she hadn't expected to be questioned for simply being kind. "Because I know what it's like," she admitted. For the first time, Lucas saw something in her eyes. Pain, buried beneath the surface, hidden well, but not completely gone. It was a flicker, a shadow of something unspoken. "What happened?" he asked before he could stop himself. Amelia hesitated again, then sighed. "Life," she said with a small laugh. "Let's just say I learned early on that the world doesn't owe you kindness. But that doesn't mean you can't give it anyway." Lucas felt something shift inside him. He wasn't sure what it was, but he knew he wasn't done with her. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, he kept returning. At first, he told himself it was about his father, that he was just making sure Charles was okay. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to know more about Amelia. He wanted to understand how someone who had so little could still give so much. Slowly, she began to trust him. She told him bits and pieces of her life, a childhood spent in foster care, a dream of going to college that had been crushed under the weight of financial struggles, a younger brother she was still trying to support. She never complained, never played the victim. She simply accepted her reality and did what she could to make the world a little better. And Lucas found himself admiring her more than he cared to admit. One evening, after the restaurant had closed, he waited outside. When Amelia stepped out, she was surprised to see him leaning against his car. "Can I give you a ride?" he asked. She hesitated, but nodded. As they drove through the quiet streets, Lucas finally spoke. "What if I told you I could change your life?" Amelia laughed. "I'd say that sounds like something rich men say when they want something." Lucas smirked, but didn't look away from the road. "What if I didn't want anything?" She studied him. "Then I'd say I don't believe you." Lucas pulled up to her apartment, turning to face her. "You helped my father when you didn't have to. You showed him kindness when the rest of the world turned its back. That means something." Amelia sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I didn't do it for a reward." "I know," Lucas said. "That's why I want to help you." Amelia frowned. "Help me how?" Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a check, a number that made her breath hitch. "This is yours," he said, "for your education, for your future." Amelia stared at the check, then at him. "Why would you do this?" Lucas exhaled. "Because you made me realize I've spent my life looking at the world the wrong way. And maybe I want to start seeing it differently." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, but she shook her head. "I can't accept this." Lucas smiled. "You can, and you will, because sometimes the world does give back." For the first time in years, Amelia let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, kindness could come full circle. And as she took the check, she knew that this moment, this act of generosity, had just altered the course of her life forever. Amelia held the check in her trembling hands, her breath catching in her throat. The numbers printed on it seemed surreal, like they belonged in someone else's life, not hers. A life where people didn't have to count every dollar, where dreams weren't abandoned in favor of survival. She wanted to reject it, to say she couldn't accept such an extravagant gift, but the words wouldn't come. Because deep down, she knew this was a chance she had never thought would come her way. Lucas watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. He had never done something like this before. He had spent years in boardrooms, making decisions that affected thousands of lives without ever thinking about the individuals behind those numbers. But this was different. This wasn't about power or wealth or business. This was about a girl who had unknowingly shattered his carefully crafted world of cynicism and showed him something he had long forgotten: humanity. She finally lifted her eyes to meet his, searching for some hidden agenda, some condition that would make this offer feel like a transaction. But there was none, just sincerity. "Why?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why would you do this for me?" Lucas exhaled, gripping the steering wheel. "Because you did something no one else did. You showed my father kindness when you had nothing to gain. And it changed something in me." Amelia swallowed the lump in her throat. She wanted to believe in goodness, but life had taught her that every kindness had a price. She had learned that the hard way. "I don't want to feel like I owe you," she admitted, her voice laced with uncertainty. Lucas shook his head. You don't owe me anything. This isn't a debt. It's a gift. And you deserve it. She let out a shaky breath, looking down at the check again. This amount of money could change everything. She could go to college. She could build a life for herself and her younger brother. She wouldn't have to work double shifts just to keep the lights on. But accepting it meant trusting that not all generosity came with hidden motives. And that was the hardest part. She stared at Lucas, the man who had walked into her life like a storm, unannounced and impossible to ignore. She had heard his name before, had seen it in headlines attached to stories about billion-dollar deals and ruthless business strategies. He was not the type of man who handed out charity. And yet here he was, offering her a lifeline. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll accept it." Lucas felt something inside him loosen, a tension he hadn't even realized was there. He gave her a small nod. "Good." Silence filled the car for a moment before Amelia let out a breathless laugh. "This is insane." Lucas smirked. "A little." She shook her head. "A lot." They sat there, both aware that this moment, this decision, had set something into motion that neither of them fully understood yet. The days that followed felt like a blur. Amelia submitted her college applications, her hands shaking as she clicked send, half expecting some cruel twist of fate to snatch this opportunity away. But nothing bad happened. For the first time in her life, doors were opening instead of closing. Lucas checked in on her more often than she expected. At first, he told himself it was just to make sure she was actually using the money for its intended purpose. But that excuse wore thin quickly. He found himself drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. There was something about her, the way she faced life's struggles with quiet strength, the way she gave without expecting anything in return, that made him question everything about himself. One evening, as she finished a late shift at the restaurant, she found him waiting outside again. "You're making a habit of this," she teased, crossing her arms as she approached his car. Lucas smirked. "Maybe I just like seeing you." She arched an eyebrow. Billionaire Lucas Sinclair has nothing better to do than wait outside a diner for a waitress? He shrugged. "Apparently not." She laughed, shaking her head. "What do you want, Lucas?" His expression turned serious. "Dinner. With me." Amelia hesitated. They had spent time together, sure, but this felt different. More deliberate. More dangerous. "Are you asking me on a date?" she asked, her voice cautious. Lucas tilted his head. "Would it be a bad thing if I was?" She bit her lip, looking away. "It's just, our lives are different." "I know," he said simply. "But I don't care." She exhaled, shaking her head. "You say that now, but..." "But nothing," he interrupted. "Look, I know I've spent my life chasing things that don't really matter. Money, power. But you," he paused, as if struggling to find the right words. "You matter." Her heart stuttered. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I don't expect anything from you, Amelia. I just want to get to know you. No expectations. No strings." She searched his face for any sign of deception, but there was none. Just sincerity. After a long pause, she nodded. "Okay. One dinner." Lucas smiled. One dinner. But deep down, they both knew. This was just the beginning. The dinner was unlike anything Amelia had ever experienced. Lucas took her to a private rooftop restaurant, the city skyline stretching out around them like a sea of lights. Everything was elegant, expensive, far beyond anything she had ever imagined for herself. But despite the luxury, what surprised her the most was Lucas himself. He wasn't the cold, calculating businessman the world painted him as. He was thoughtful, observant. He listened when she spoke, genuinely interested in what she had to say. And somewhere between the main course and dessert, she realized she was in trouble. Because she was starting to fall for him. Lucas felt it too. It was in the way he looked at her, as if she was something precious. As if she was something he had been searching for, without even realizing it. As the night drew to a close, Lucas walked her to his car, his hands in his pockets. "I meant what I said," he told her. "I don't care about the differences between us." Amelia sighed, looking down. "Lucas, whatever this is, it's not simple." "I don't want simple," he said firmly. "I just want you." Her breath hitched. For the first time in years, Amelia allowed herself to hope. To believe that maybe, just maybe, happiness was something she could reach for. And so she did. She let him in. She let herself fall. But love, no matter how strong, does not erase the past. And neither of them were prepared for what happened next. It started with a headline. Billionaire heir Lucas Sinclair involved with Waitress. Who is she? Amelia woke up to her phone buzzing with notifications. Messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Strangers flooding her social media. Some curious, some cruel. Lucas called her immediately. Amelia, don't read any of it. I'll handle it. But it was too late. They had dug into her past. Her childhood in foster care. Her financial struggles. Even her younger brother's medical history. They painted her as a gold digger. A woman who had set her sights on a billionaire and played the long game. She had been naive to think the world would accept them so easily. Tears burned her eyes as she read the cruel words. Lucas arrived at her apartment within the hour, his jaw tight with anger. I'll fix this, he promised. I'll make it go away. But Amelia shook her head. This isn't just about us, Lucas. They're dragging my family into this. I won't let them hurt you, he swore. But the damage had already been done. And for the first time since she met him, she wondered, was love worth this? Lucas saw the doubt in her eyes, and his heart clenched. He had fought for business deals. He had fought for power. But now, for the first time in his life, he was about to fight for something that actually mattered. Her. And he wasn't going to lose.